Whether it's your relationships, your mental health, or the world around you, it's all falling apart. But what if collapse isn't the end? What if it's actually the start of something more true? In this episode, I'll share what engineers, therapists, and mystics all understand about surviving collapse and why trying to hold it together might be the worst thing you can do. Hi, Wounded Healers. I'm Brian Hogan, life coach, filmmaker, and clinical therapist. Welcome to another Wellness Wednesday, your weekly oasis at the intersection of creativity and well-being. Today, we're exploring the way to navigate collapse, the patterns in it, and most importantly, how to create survival pockets so that you can remain intact while things crumble around you. Let's get into it. I've been learning how to navigate various collapses currently happening in my own life. And if you're on the same planet Earth as the rest of us, then you probably have a whole bunch of collapses happening around you too. Some collapses are being televised. Some are happening within our hearts. Some are happening within our families. But they are happening. And they're happening on multiple levels all at the same time. Today, I'm going to share with you 3 do's and 3 don'ts about handling collapse that engineers already know. And then I'm going to share 2 stories of collapse in my own life, one where I handled it terribly and one where I figured out how to handle it well. Let's start with the 3 most common mistakes we make during a collapse. So, don't number 1. Don't deny it's happening or freeze. If you deny it or hesitate, you will be crushed. If you return for your belongings, you will be crushed. During a collapse is not the time to freeze or hesitate or think to yourself, this can't be real, I'll be fine. A structural engineer named Feng Fu explains the term pancake collapse, which is when structures look perfectly fine 1 minute and then catastrophically fall floor by floor the next minute. It can happen fast, and that requires action, not denial, not freeze, action. So if you suspect this might be happening to you, listen to this description because it looks like denial, disassociation, minimizing, this kind of freeze thing. Our minds hand us thoughts like, oh, maybe it will stop on its own. Or spiritually, we might still be clinging to outdated dogmas and identities that in our quietest moments we know are not authentic to who we are anymore. Even if at one point they were, identity can change. It can be hard to let go of outdated modes of being, thinking, and sensing because they make us feel safe in their familiarity, like an old sweater. But those are precisely what are collapsing. And like some old sweaters, this one can't be patched, salvaged, or donated to Goodwill. It has unraveled into yarn, no longer salvageable as a sweater. And sometimes we still try to wear the yarn and say, look at my beautiful sweater. But it's absurd. Inside, when you're clinging to old identities, you sense that feeling of absurdity, a feeling of misalignment with that odd cognitive structure, that ball of yarn that's no longer right for you. Here's what happened when I tried to wear the tangle of yarn and pretended it was still a sweater. I was a born-again Christian for almost 7 years, starting in high school. And the community accepted me and made me feel safe and belonging, and my secret identity as a gay man was suddenly less terrifying because I wasn't so alone. Until one day I realized they were saying this loving guy named Jesus actually hated gay people, and I should hate them too. I mean, not in so many words, but, it's heavily implied. And so my belief system started collapsing. I clung to it for a while too, but it became absurd for me as well. Why would an unconditionally loving God care what I do with my twig and berries if I'm not hurting anyone? I just knew in my bones he didn't care. God's love was bigger than that, bigger than those ideas, bigger than language, bigger than any system of understanding can contain. So I had to let that outdated belief system go, so I could continue to become who I was meant to become. I was born again, then I died again. But I don't blame Jesus. He's a great example of how to be alive. Some of his followers got it twisted, and that was traumatizing until the suffering led to a collapse, which ultimately gave way to my freedom. And that's the entire point. On the other side of whatever is collapsing is freedom. So don't deny, don't freeze, allow. That was a spiritual collapse, but the pattern is the same, structural, emotional, or societal. Once the load-bearing lie gives out, you have 2 choices. Try to prop it up and get crushed, or step back and let it fall. Don't number 2. Don't try to stop the collapse mid-fall. Propping up structures mid-collapse will redistribute the weight in a way that makes it worse when it falls over. This can look like a grieving mom who lost a child, for example, just carrying on and not taking any time to let the collapse of her worldview happen and to grieve it properly. You can't stop a collapsing building by bracing it. after the failure has begun, you will get crushed, and you may create chaos that will inadvertently crush others who weren't even in the original collapse zone. Another engineer named Yui Starosik describes the phenomenon of trying to hold up crumbling structures, which redistributes forces unpredictably and increases the danger. The parallel for us psychologically and spiritually is like efforting or scrambling to fix things that are clearly breaking. Like if you're scrambling to fix a marriage or a job or a belief system that's no longer right for you instead of just letting it fall. So the thing to remember here, if something is collapsing around you, even if it's something you want dearly, if it's collapsing, it can't be salvaged. You might be able to salvage some parts of it after the collapse, because afterwards you can rebuild, but you've got to let the collapse happen. So let go or be dragged. Collapse is momentum. It is not a malfunction. It's a momentum towards something new. It's the false giving way. And when the false gives way, it gives way to truth. And when we have truth, we can find freedom. So that brings me to don't number 3. Don't cling to old frameworks. The analogy here would be trying to rebuild on a faulty foundation that just sustained the collapse. This is clinging to old ways of thinking and behaving and interacting and trying to do the same thing over again. The foundation is now compromised. It has cracks, and if you try to rebuild on it, it's going to lead to secondary collapse. Engineers will actually red tag buildings post-earthquake, and they say unsafe to occupy because they know you can't rebuild on this faulty foundation. Psychologically, this is like when we say, okay, well, we'll just go back to how things were, which is an attempt to reconstruct an ego identity exactly as it was without understanding why the collapse happened, why the failure happened. So not allowing in self-awareness that would reteach and train you to do something new. If you do that, collapsing again is inevitable if you deny the awareness piece, because the issues that led to the first collapse are not acknowledged or addressed. So we don't want to cling to the old ways. We don't want to try and stop at mid-fall, and we don't want to deny it or freeze. Those are surefire ways to get crushed under the weight of whatever it is that's collapsing around you. That's what not to do. Now I'll share 3 things, counterintuitive strategies that you can use during a collapse that just might save your life. These 3 strategies are structural as well as psychological, because collapse is part of a system. Letting it fall the right way is often safer and cleaner and wiser than trying to stop it from falling. If you're in the middle of a collapse right now or already piled under the rubble, just know you're not broken. You're between frameworks, and you are not alone. So here's what you can do. Do number 1. Listen to stress fractures instead of trying to force solutions. Engineers inspect for cracks in order to find the cause and direction of patterns, and then they can detect all of that long before a collapse. Collapses have warning signs. In your personal life, if you don't ignore stress fractures, you can do something before a collapse is imminent. In society, we're already mid-collapse already right now because we ignored the warning signs for so long, so now we have to survive it and then rebuild. So checking for stress fractures is something you can do in your own life for the collapses that are imminent but haven't started yet. So right here, for any personal collapses, you have noticed the stress fractures, and then you can start to address the things that are breaking before they collapse. Instead of patching symptoms, you can ask, where is this load actually too heavy? Collapses reveal what wasn't load-bearing, what wasn't truth, what wasn't sustainable after all. That's what it means to look for stress fractures. It's about mindfulness, like go slower, noticing what feels like too much early on before it becomes actually too much. For personal collapses that haven't started yet, you can notice stress fractures. But for the collapse of society that is already well underway, we need to do the next thing. So do number 2. Allow the collapse while creating survival pockets. So for the collapse of society or any other personal collapse that you're going through that is already happening, you want to do this thing that engineers call the triangle of life. You allow the collapse because it's unstoppable anyway, and you create survival pockets. This is about bringing your creativity to bear on the situation at hand while being rooted in the reality of the situation. This is not denial or bypassing or rose-colored glasses. It's getting curious and saying, what can I make out of all of this debris? Because the reality is, yes, we're collapsing. I'm really here. But the creativity is also present. What can I do about it now? And in engineering, In earthquakes or structural failure zones, safety lies in void spaces. That's like a bathtub or under solid furniture, like interior corners, things like that. So you're not stopping the collapse, you're surviving within the collapse. And this is called the triangle of life. So in engineering and architecture, these safety pockets are like fail-safes or buffer zones. These are intentional design elements that help structure absorb or redirect stress during failure. Their goal is not to prevent the collapse, but to ensure that collapse happens predictably and not chaotically, to ensure that critical parts of the system are protected, like your life, and that there's a time and space for people to exit safely. So examples of this kind of survival pocket are crumple zones in cars, where the front end of the car is like engineered purposely to deform in a crash because it absorbs all the energy. So the cabin where the people are remains good. That's a safety pocket. It's supposed to collapse strategically. Pressure release valves on boilers and engines operate the same way. The safety valve is meant to release the extra pressure. Without it, there'd be an explosion. So creating survival pockets for yourself is a way to manage collapses as they happen. What does it look like to create survival pockets in our personal lives? Great question. Glad you asked. It looks like creating an inner still point. So this means we want to create practices, rituals, or habits for ourselves that will support us during collapse. Creating a practice of breath work, nature walks, meditation, even video games. Whatever it is for you that allows you to manage stress and touch into your equanimity is allowed. This doesn't need to be holy or spiritual. It needs to be effective. It needs to work. And what it needs to work to do is to bring you back down out of your anxiety into your still point so you can see clearly. When we're in a terrible situation, the tools that we practice in our daily lives become our default response. So creating practices like this forms a buffer for you from the psychological stress of the collapse. If you're wondering what practice you should do, then check out some episodes of DIY Wellness. It's live on Mondays. It's also on YouTube or Spotify. You can get some ideas from those episodes because every episode is like basically a tool or a practice you can bring into your life. So safety pockets, the triangle of life, it's within the collapse. It's because within the collapse, we can either give into our emotional despair or we can fall back on our breath work. We can fall back on our community of support. We can fall back on our mindfulness training. Or without any of that, we can just fall. So that's what it means to create survival pockets. You can't stop the collapse from happening, nor should you. But you can find a way to have a little less chaos within the collapse. So the presence of these pockets doesn't stop a collapse. It just ensures that you survive intact. And that's what we want. A more resilient, more radiant version of us on the other side of this terrible, terrible stuff that we're going through. Finally, do number 3. Rebuild with better load distribution and redundancies. So that's more psychological flexibility and more adaptability. In engineering, modern retrofits use things like shear walls and flexible joints as a way of distributing force instead of resisting it rigidly, because strong structures will bend before they will break. This is why they do that. They think about skyscrapers that sway during earthquakes. This is actually echoed by Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching, where he says that in a conflict, be the one who is flexible, who can bend, because victory goes to the one who yields. So keep that in mind when you design a new life, identity, or belief system. You want to allow more movement, more uncertainty, more paradox than the structure that you were living in before, than the mindset or belief system you had before, because that one collapsed. Trauma integration isn't about becoming stronger. It's about becoming more flexible, more able to navigate life with all of its hiccups, ups and downs, back and forthiness. Rigid things tend to snap, while flexible things tend to sail right on through. So you want to rebuild with more load distribution and more redundancies, which means becoming more flexible, more adaptable, more able to go with the flow. It doesn't mean you have to enjoy things that life throws at you, but it means you begin to really know how to handle them because you've created load distribution in your life. So I want to bring this all home with 2 stories of collapses that have happened to me and how I learned all of this the hard way. So the first collapse, I handled it terribly. I literally did all of the don'ts. Every single one that I told you not to do, I did. And then there's also a story of where I handled it better. It was a little bit later in my future, in my development. So I was a little wiser and had a little bit more experience under my belt. So the first collapse was the collapse of my medical marijuana business. Some of you who've been watching for a while know that I used to run a medical marijuana dispensary with a buddy of mine in West Hollywood. At a certain point, about 5 years in, we started working with another company and we were going to expand. And it turned out that company actually had this secret agenda to like hostile take over us. So when all of that was going down, I tried to deny that it was real. Like they would not do this, would they? I was in such denial. These are our friends. They would never do that. So I tried to deny it. I tried to deny it was happening and I froze, which definitely made it worse. I also tried to save it. At one point, this thing that was now on a faulty foundation, we'd signed up to be part of it with this other group, and so it had a crack in it. It had a crack in the foundation. So this nefarious group was doing their thing, and we tried to save it by moving it to the neighbor's house and hiding it in the office, hiding the office basically in the apartment next door, which is the very definition of building on a faulty foundation. So I literally tried both of the things I told you guys not to do. Then I also tried the third one after that. After it was done collapsing, I tried to build the same business all over again in a different town. And that's essentially like trying to do the same thing that didn't work a second time. Because the truth was, for me, running the medical marijuana business wasn't actually right for my soul. It was a great thing that I did for those 5 years. It was a divine detour that taught me so much. But I look back on it now and I can see now through what went down that the collapse was a divine gift for me from the universe. And so even though I tried everything I could to prop it up, to prop up the old way, I'm happier now on the other side of the collapse. So don't make the same mistakes I did. If you're in something that you're trying to prop up, even if you think you love it dearly, there's a chance that you're going to be better off on the other side of it, having let it collapse. So keep that in mind too, because I didn't know I'd be better off. I did everything wrong and I tried to hold this thing in place. I got crushed under the weight of it. And then once I was able to drag myself out from under the rubble and heal, I was much, much better off. And that leads me to my second story of collapse, which is when my tailbone broke 4 years ago. So that was like a literal collapse of my body. But this time, fast forward 7 years after the medical marijuana thing that collapsed where I handled it poorly. And this time I handled it much, much better. So my tailbone broke, but I didn't know that yet. I just had a fall and I hit the ground hard and I hurt my butt. So I was butt hurt. And after a couple of days, I wasn't feeling any better, so I went to the ER instead of ignoring it like I did with my middle finger, which broke back in high school, and I just ignored it. And then when my wrist broke 8 months later, the doctor was like, "Oh, your middle finger here is broken. What? We should fix that." And I was like, "Oh my God." Like I have a fracture in my middle finger. I didn't even know or care. I just dealt with the pain and I was like, "This is it. I will always have this pain." So that's again like not doing it right. That was ignoring a stress fracture. And this time I did it right. I went to the ER. I got it checked. And I was like, something's wrong. I want to look at the stress fractures. I want to see them clearly and I want to do what I can about it. So I did not deny or freeze. I got curious. I also created safety pockets during this by getting creative about how to do work lying down and how to stay current on my studies by reaching out for support. So I didn't just let the collapse of my body and the collapse of my bone structure collapse everything else. I found creative ways to be rooted in the reality of what I was stuck with. I was lying flat for 3 months, but I was also able to bring my creativity online and say, that doesn't have to mean I'm miserable. There's a way to thrive in this, or at least to survive in this. And then the third thing is, by the time the tailbone happened, I had been practicing the coaching and psychology principles that I'm teaching you guys now. In 2014, I had barely begun to learn this stuff. But by 2021, they were more firmly rooted. And so some of these things were the redundancies, the alternative perspectives and possibilities. And this is the load distribution, my emotional regulation skills, my psychological flexibility to be able to say, oh, there's maybe more than one way to handle this. There's more than one way to make meaning out of this. So those adaptability and flexibility skills, I did not have them in 2014, just did not have them. And I crumbled under the weight of my collapse. And now I have them more, and I was able to handle the more recent collapse with a little more grace and equanimity. Not in the sense that it's better to handle it one way or the other, like in some kind of trying to be impressive way, because who cares how we look to other people? But in the sense that I was less miserable and more peaceful within and during my collapse. That's the point. It's about you having less misery and suffering. So that's the key, not virtue signaling. This is not about trying to handle things well. so you can be a certain way in the world. The point of it is to reduce your own suffering and to increase your own joy and peace and personal freedom. That is what changes the world. We are living through collapse in our society and in the world. There's no two ways about that, and likely within yourself as well. So don't deny it or freeze. Don't try to stop the collapse and don't try to rebuild it on a shaky foundation. Instead, bring so much self-kindness as you allow the old patterns and the old paradigms in and around you to break down. It's okay if it all falls down. Use your creativity and clear-sighted look at reality to find survival pockets. Then, when it's time to rebuild, have the courage to build something brand new, something born of the new you post-collapse, the one rooted in their values, the person rooted in their integrity, and rooted in an understanding of our deep interconnectedness as a species. Collapse is not the end of the story. It's the part of the story where a deeper truth breaks through. So let it break through to you too. If this spoke to you, send it to someone who might need a little encouragement inside their own collapse. And if you're walking through one yourself, drop a comment and let us know what's helping you survive. Until next week, peace and much love. I trust you, humanity. You've got this.